I just wanted to welcome our guests and our viewers to meet our NativeLab Fellows today. My name is Bird Runningwater, and I am the head of Sundance Institute's Indigenous program. I belong to the Cheyenne and Mescalero Apache tribes, and I am coming to everybody from Tongva and Tataviam ancestral lands here in Los Angeles. And we have our three Native fellows with us who competed in a national selection process, actually international selection process for the first time to be selected for our annual NativeLab. For the first time this year, we opened up our submissions to Canada to include Indigenous filmmakers from Canada. And we're very proud to be able to select our first Indigenous Canadian fellow. And but I just wanted to get started by having each fellow introduce themselves, if they could, and tell us where it is that they're dialing in from.
Yate, she Kenny Jones, Inishia, Nakarina and Lishla, Totsoni Bashin, Haskanzo, Shiche, Do, Tachi Industriale, Malay Dahilina Dan Nasha. Hello everyone, my name is KEANU Jones. I am originally from Grand Falls, Arizona, which is on the Navajo Nation. And I'm currently calling in from Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is primarily Pueblo territory. I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, KEANU. Rob?
Hey, Cuiraba, Nije Riwala Kuhu, Roberto Fetal. Good afternoon. My name is Rob Fatal. I'm calling to you from Ohlone Land in Oakland, California. I myself am from Miwok, Maidu, and Nisenan land in Sacramento, California. And I come from the Raramuri, Ute, and Pueblo peoples. I'm a mixed person as well, so yeah.
Thank you for that. Amanda.
Tanti, Nitigason, Amanda Strong. Hello everyone, my name is Amanda Strong. I'm currently calling in from the Squamish territory and nation, also known as Gibsons, BC on the Sunshine Coast. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here.
Thank you. And Amanda here is our first Indigenous Canadian fellow who is being able to participate in the NativeLab for the first time. You know, typically we've mostly focused on, American artists, but this year we launched a really great partnership with the Indigenous Screen Office in Canada, which supported the participation of our Indigenous fellow from Canada. So thank you, and we're so happy that you could be here. I wanted to just kind of, just give a little bit of background about the NativeLab. This current model of the NativeLab that we run is really it's maybe third or fourth iteration of the way that Sundance Institute has chosen to invest in Indigenous filmmakers. And over the years, we have always been able to kind of morph and respond to the community to kind of, meet the community where they are, and to be able to provide very targeted and strategic support to help advance not only the making of films, but also kind of the nurturing of voices, and to be able to elevate those voices within all the different cinema forms that we are able to work in. And so this particular lab has been, for the past 5 years, has been focused on supporting short films. In our pre-COVID world, it was a director's lab for short films. And this year, we made adaptations to still continue short films, but we did it, virtually, like in this format currently. And I feel like we were still able to really create a dynamic, supportive environment. We even implemented small kind of shooting exercises that filmmakers did as their homework within their own environments and within a safe atmosphere. And I felt like it was quite successful, I guess, if I had to say so. But I don't know, I'm really interested to hear from the fellows in terms of what they felt and what they, well, I guess maybe kind of start with what is your project? And what is it that inspired your project? We'll start with Amanda.
So my project is called We To Go War, and I'm the director and co-writer of the piece. And it's inspired and comes from the short story written by Richard Van Camp, who's a Tliko Dene writer from the Northwest Territories in Canada. And there's just something that always spoke to me about the kind of oral stories of the Wetago and Wendigo, and was really grateful when Richard reached out to want to adapt this into an animation. And so in this particular case, our project is a stop motion animation. So it's a bit outside of the live action realm. And yeah, it's the story. It's kind of a futuristic, indigenous futurism story where we travel 2 lifetimes from now, where the Wetago have kind of built an army, and they sort of represent the greed of man and what's happening to the earth and the land and water right now. And we're brought into the story of Dove, who is our main character, and they're a gender shifter. So they're both a boy and a girl. And we're kind of going along the journey with Dove and their own journey to kind of grow into their own power and being in preparation to fight the Wetago.
Great. And would you say that this particular story is reflective of some of your previous kinds of stories that you've tried to tell?
Yeah, I think in some ways. I mean, I haven't necessarily worked with the oral story of the Wetago before, but I think, and I know it's a very touchy subject in a lot of nations, and I think our focus is on the hope of Dove and not exploiting the character of the Wetago and what they actually represent in a negative way. Like we're really trying to focus on the hope of this future, the return of medicine to the land, and the power of Dove being a water and land protector in this world. So yeah, I think there's a lot of common themes and moral compasses and political alignments that I believe in, which is why I want to support and direct this project.
Wow, that's so great. And I do have to say, your project is one of the first times that we've ever taken in an animation project as well to the lab. But I really felt like, given, the current world we're living in, if we had a bit more opportunity, I think, to take risks. And also, since we weren't doing a director's portion of our lab, that we thought we could take a really unique project like yours on. So not only are you the first Indigenous Canadian artist, you're also kind of the first animated story that we've taken on, it's exciting. I'm so excited to be working with you, and I can't wait to see how it turns out.
We're very excited too, and not grateful for the way things are right now, but that it in a way allowed for a project like this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Rob, why don't you tell us a bit about your project?
Yeah, so my project is called Can Digital Genizaros Remember the Taste of Churros? And it's set in the near future when a corporation unveils this technology that promises immortality to people who want to leave their body and use this technology to upload their consciousness to the internet. The film centers on a two-spirit person named Ria, and they're battling like poverty, violence, disease. And after this technology gets introduced, kind of considering everything that's happening in their life, they're debating whether to follow like thousands and thousands of people in the world into this like digital unknown. And it's changed tone since I started the lab, but it's definitely pretty firmly like a science fiction drama now, which I'm really excited about.
That's exciting to hear that it's changed since the lab. We might have to dig into that.
How can you not get changed by this lab? This was like, this was monumental. It was amazing.
Could you, for those that may not be familiar, the concept of Genizarios, could you kind of explain that and what that means?
Yeah, so my dad's indigenous side is Guaramuri from northern Mexico, like in Parral, Chihuahua. My mom's side, though, is detribalized. The most concrete indigenous identity we have is our Southern Plains identity, but we're also like a mix of like a lot of different Pueblo people and different like indigenous like tribes of the, I guess what you call the Southwest now. But Genizaro is actually, I think, a really important term in understanding. Let me start over. Genizaro is a really important term that kind of originated a very long time ago, where like in the 1600s, when the Spanish came and started like kidnapping and putting into slavery a lot of different indigenous tribes in the Southwest, Genizaro became a designation that was given to like an indigenous person who had lost their affiliation with their tribe through like slavery, through imprisonment. And as a result, this kind of like conglomerate of detribalized indigenous people were like, well, we're going to be our own thing. And so that identity is now kind of starting to get a little bit more modern recognition, as opposed to being this like slander like kind of word that maybe it was back in the 1700s. But a lot of these indigenous genizaros, like who were detribalized under the Spanish, were able to really like fight for their own identity. And to me, as somebody who deals with the post-apocalypse and science fiction a lot, that's a really important term for me, because I think it's one of the times where I saw like indigenous people being like, we're going to forge an identity after this really traumatic incident has happened, and we're going to make new culture after our culture's been taken away from us. And it reminds me so much of like the Mad Max sci-fi kind of films, where you see new cultures emerging from the death of former cultures, or the detachment from former cultures or former ways of life. So to me, Genízaro signifies trauma and tragedy that happens in colonization, and at the same time signifies hope and resilience and survival.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for explaining that, because I know it's a concept. I hadn't heard the Genízaro's term before, but you know, I have heard kind of in like the Latin American context, you know, the notion of mestizo, or even kind of in Canada, the Métis, you know, cultures and communities, and so the notion of blending. So
yeah, mestizo is a little different. I mean, I would identify as mestizo because I'm literally like Spanish and indigenous mixed together. Genízaros necessarily are not mixed. They're just, they can't like, they can be. Genízaros can also just be fully indigenous people who have been ripped away from their culture and their lineage. So
okay, thank you. That's interesting. KEANU, why don't you tell us a bit about your project and why you wanted to tell this story?
Yeah, my project is called Ownership, and it's about looking from the perspective of Gilbert, who's an oppressed silversmith who works with a trading post owner, and through that relationship, learns about the kind of business world of the Indian kind of jewelry market that is established in the Southwest. And I think where kind of the inspiration came from, I know I talked about this fairly in our fellowship and workshops. Watching Uncut Gems by the Safdie brothers was one of the biggest inspirations, because it was a glimpse into kind of the trading market for jewelry. And I thought that was kind of interesting to, you know, how films are able to, you know, look in glimpses into these different worlds and realities. And kind of thinking about that, I always like to come out of films asking myself, you know, what is the perspective for Native people or Indigenous peoples, you know, maybe in that same world. So if we kind of look at jewelry kind of markets and jewelry in that kind of Indigenous perspective, what might that look like? And you know, being in Gallup, New Mexico, as one of, you know, New Mexico being the hotspots of the jewelry kind of trading epicenter, it's you know, it hit me to really start writing something that can show, you know, that world. And I think that was kind of interesting to really look at, and just understanding kind of the dynamics. And a lot of it has to deal with the themes of, you know, like power or kind of like identity and wealth, kind of wrapped up all together. And as kind of economic kind of status and everything, you know, there's a lot of connections in that. So I think just being able to understand the functionalities of what a border town is, just to kind of give a little bit background of what border towns are essentially towns set outside of indigenous communities, where, you know, indigenous people have to go to those communities to get certain resources and supplies to live on the reservation, because there's a lack of infrastructure and economic development established in those places. for us to actually have access to those goods. So kind of just looking at the bigger picture, I think that was something that I saw within, just the jewelry market, kind of, I don't know, the functionality of how it works.
What about your story makes it feel urgent to you right now, I guess, in these times, especially these times that we're living in? Do you feel like there's a particular urgency to any of your stories, Rob?
I feel like there's a particular urgency for my story specifically. It's very much inspired by a lot of like the tech innovations, gentrification, protests for like indigenous rights that are happening like in the Bay Area where I live right now. And especially as like, BLM has been like supercharging their efforts recently, which has been a really powerful thing to watch happen like right outside my window in Oakland. The world that this character Rhea lives in is a world very similar to our own, just with this like little bit of a twist. And I and my community are over here, like my Two-Spirit community, specifically in the Bay. A lot of us deal with things like depression. A lot of us deal with things like lack of resources, lack of familial support after a lot of us came out. And how we survive these like really tumultuous revolutionary times as a community, I think starts with the choice to stay and fight. And at the core of my story, that's what this is about. And I see myself and a lot of people making this choice to stay and like do the work and fight together, which is why I feel like this story is very timely right now,
I would agree with that. I also think I think it's like you mentioned, especially also kind of maybe referencing the social justice movement that we're in. I even know that even during the 2 weeks of our own NativeLab period, like that there were even major shifts within, the Native community in the US specifically, it's like, I remember closing down my laptop for the day one day I think it was on the first Friday of our lab. And I had been getting text messages and social media threads were flowing. I was trying to avoid them, but that's when there were some Native activists standing up for the Trump visit at Mount Rushmore. And then simultaneously, that's when like a big push was happening by Illuminative to change the name of the Redskins. And there was like, even during in the exterior world that while we were trying to maintain our little pod of, really exploring your stories, like even the world was, I think, dramatically shifting around us. Amanda, do you feel like will that affect your story? Because I know that there's like, ecological kind of issues specifically that you're honing in on your story that are very timely.
Yeah, I mean, I think something that's really interesting for me is I know that the Wetiko are technically like a being and people can become them. They're a creature and they're a real oral story. That's the other thing. This isn't a myth or kind of just like a glorified zombie. These are real oral traditions for a lot of Indigenous nations in Canada, like the Cree and the Anishinaabe. And one thing that like different people have talked to me about is like, it's more about the metaphor of like, what do they really represent though? So beyond the being itself, there's also what they represent. And to me, that's sort of greed and man and like what they're doing to the earth right now. You think of things like the tar sands in Canada, even what's happening in Wet'suwet'en territory, Standing Rock, like all these things where communities are being exploited for resources or polluting our waters, destroying the land. I think all these things, even cities themselves can be considered like the spirit of a Wetiko where, it's this like, it's a destruction of the earth. It's a dishonor to the earth. And so again, this is why I feel, I guess it's so important. And I think, yeah, it's so relative to what's happening in so many ways in the world right now, in Canada and the States and beyond. People fighting and standing up for those things, to have a right to protect things that aren't humans, like animals and water and basic things that we all need to survive. And then there's also, I think, for me, the element of who Dove is, and Dove being like a gender shifter. And I think there's been, you know, really positive movements on fighting for gender like, you know, breaking gender binaries. And so I am also just so excited to have like a lead character be a boy and a girl in an animation where they're not a victim, they're not a backdrop, they're not there to just be exploited. That's just who they are. And yeah, I'm someone who has always grown up on a gender level, like just not feeling like one or the other or both, or one day I feel like, well, I'm a boy today, and like I can be very feminine too. So it's the idea of shifting is something very real to me. And then, like I said, I feel very passionate about all the movements that are happening and how this film is super relative to that right now.
I can totally see that. I can, especially, I think as we're looking at the shifts, major shifts happening kind of in not only our American culture, I'm sure it's happening in Canada too, but also globally. I think kind of like the dismantling of so many systems of identification and imposed identification, and even, I think, even tying into structures of stories and storytelling. You know, I feel like KEANU, your story, I felt like really was touching on such an interesting common theme that we've seen in a lot of Navajo cinema about the difficulties and the complexities of the border towns, you know, which are one, economic centers and powers, but also kind of just deeply, deeply racist and hateful towards, you know, the Native communities that they actually thrive off of economically. And I think that, I don't know, would you say that your film is really looking at kind of those colonized, I guess, economic models and systems? I feel like it is.
Yeah, I think so too. And also just to kind of, you know, I don't necessarily know a whole lot about the history of silversmith as well, but I think it'd be interesting to learn about it and really understand, you know, where that form came from. Because, you know, if we look at trying to understand border towns, it's always been a part of, you know, our Native communities from trading posts basically. And that's how we're able to, you know, provide for ourselves, is to either weave blankets or, you know, produce certain products like bracelets and jewelry to sell to the trading posts to provide for families. So it's interesting to know that, you know, that's a part of our history. Then, you know, that has evolved into an actual like city, and going to, you know, cities across, you know, just thinking about like the Navajo Nation, you know, there's all these border towns around it. So if we kind of just look at that model of a trading post, you know, that's basically the functionality of border towns in a sense. And I think just being able to explore a different portion of a border town, you know, just look more, spending more time examining kind of the jewelry kind of aspects of things. And I was pretty conscious about not necessarily spending a lot of time and delving deeper into the cultural importance and the cultural aspects of silversmith, because I know that's a whole different, you know, kind of beast and idea and venture on its own. So I kind of wanted to focus on just more of this aspect of the business part of the relationship between the both of the main characters. But yeah, I think it's very timely. And I don't know, that's pretty much what I have to say. Yeah.
Thank you. No, I will, you know, I will say that was one of the intriguing elements of your story that really kind of piqued my interest, is like really trying to look at, I guess, what you would say would be kind of like the economic justice, you know, of some of these economies and border towns and those that profit off of Native creativity and arts, you know, because it does happen a lot in a lot of different places. I've even seen it in visiting, you know, Australia, in the central desert of Australia, this little town called Alice Springs, which is really considered to be a center of, you know, Indigenous Australian art. And there are stores that are known for exploiting and not sharing profits, you know, with these generational painters, you know, that Australian painters, you know, who make the most beautiful, elaborate dot paintings that have been so exploited and, you know, historically. So it's something that, you know, I feel like that does happen, you know, in a lot of different places besides the United States. So it's a really interesting view and a look that I think your story may really, other communities might really find a lot of similarity in. I wondered if there was there a single takeaway or more, if you could narrow it down to one? I know there were many. I know there were hundreds of takeaways from the NativeLab. But could any of you talk about maybe one thing that really resonated the most with you, given the fact that you're telling cultural stories, you're exploring all of these imposed structures. We were living in you know, in this Zoom world while the world around us, I think, was crumbling and restructuring and you know, and is being challenged in different ways, which I imagine that must have been really difficult to focus, first of all. So I commend you for being able to focus, but was there anything that resonated the most, given all of those variables? No? Go ahead, Rob. Ladies first.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Yes.
What was I gonna say? Yeah, but I mean, I kind of didn't want to say this because I feel like it's going to jump on a question that is supposed to come up later. But I will say one of my biggest takeaways from this lab was writing myself into the characters and writing my own personal experiences in more. And I felt that, and Amanda, I don't know if you have this feeling sometimes, but like, for me, science fiction is a thought experiment where I can imagine two-spirit folks, indigenous folks, mestizos, living on into the future and like thriving and existing in a way that I haven't really ever seen before. Like I didn't really see a lot of people that looked like me as a kid, or who didn't represent the cultures that I came from, or who didn't have my sexuality or my gender identity. Like I didn't see those people in Star Trek or like Mad Max, or you know, like all the Aboriginal people are magically have disappeared in Mad Max, you know, right? Like there's none of us in the future. And one of the things that my mentors at Sundance had taught me is like, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're writing science fiction, you know, 50,000 years in the future and they're speaking alien languages or whatever. It starts with your experience, and that experience has to be the cornerstone of where this material is coming from. Like it has to be that personal, and it doesn't matter what face you put on it. And I think for me, I was using science fiction as a way to like kind of not have to deal with the heavy stuff that I was bringing to this character and where this character came from. And so while I know another question later on says, how do you like detach yourself from your character? How do you find a balance between yourself and your experience and your character? Well, my kick in the butt from my mentors at Sundance was like, you need to really go there, and you need to like confront this dark, scary shadow stuff that's hiding there. And you got to let your character go there because you need to have to go there. And I remember telling one of my mentors, like, I'm really scared because I sometimes don't know if I'm going to make it out of all of this stuff, you know? And she's like, well, you're here and your character will still be here, you know? And I just started bawling because that gave me hope, and it made me realize why I'm writing science fiction as this kind of medicine to like make this promise that we can all make it in this future, you know, as indigenous folks, as queer folks, as two-spirit folks. So, yeah.
That's really beautiful. Thank you. And I also think that, you know, you're here, your character's here, but also you have an opportunity, I think, to touch other people who maybe have a similar experience of not seeing themselves. And I think that is really kind of one of the core, you know, philosophies of our program, is really looking at, you know, indigenous stories and being able to create, you know, opportunities for our indigenous people to see themselves on screen, which is, especially in the United States, has historically been, you know, pure misrepresentation. You know, it's been purely inauthentic, and up until, you know, the time that we started making our own films, and that's only been, you know, in the past 30, 40 years. So you're contributing a really interesting, I think, genre to a very important legacy. So I can't wait to see your characters come to life. Yeah. Keanu, for you, was there a takeaway that resonated the most?
Yeah, I think talking a little bit about what Rob mentioned, I think a lot of your ability to be a little bit more vulnerable with your characters, and also I think just also not to be scared that, you know, the viewers or people who's going to read it's going to know something about you through those characters. And I guess you shouldn't feel that, you know, that's the main reason why you don't want to put your stuff, you know, heavy stuff into your character that makes them more of a three-dimensional and almost like a real, you know, character that's alive in that world. And also just a part of that, I think one of the big takeaways I think that really that I never really thought about was the whole process of making a film and just being, you know, just looking at Elamiah's kind of process of being able to, you know, have that structure in place when you bring your crew on to have them kind of learn about, you know, the situation, the place, and have those kind of in place. So your crew is very competent and knows the kind of history and cultural kind of events that happen in those spaces, so that when you go into that world, you know, you feel what other people are feeling. But at the end of those shoots and at the end of those processes, being able to have you know, other practices and procedures to help alleviate those stress and pains that people might be feeling during those times of the shoot. And honestly, that's something that I never ever thought about for some reason, and I thought that was a really almost indigenous way of looking at making something, is because, you know, you're there with your community or people, and you have that responsibility to take care of them and also take care of yourself. And so I guess now I kind of think about it, it's like, you know, I should really do a better job at understanding, you know, what the characters might be going through, the actors and actress, and the places that they have to go, you know, and make sure that they can get out of that place somehow. And I thought that was, you know, I thought that was something that I really want to practice going on, making more projects, is being able to have that kind of in place. But that's probably one of the biggest takeaways I got from the lab.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because yeah, I felt like, you know, by kicking off, you know, the Native Lab with Elamiah Tailfeather's presentation, just about how, you know, she essentially dismantled the colonial production model and also creative process in the way that she made her feature film, you know, was so interesting and so unique. And I know a lot of other Indigenous filmmakers have been doing that, but I just found that the way that she articulates it, and all of the things that you're talking about, you know, be it taking care and educating people. And what was the one thing she's called it, was like Indigenous kind of competency training for her crew. So interesting, and I think so necessary for us in order to flourish, you know, by basically creating our own production models rather than, you know, the standard ones that have typically been, you know, I think implemented maybe within a Hollywood structure or something. I think related to that, Amanda, one of the things that I felt like was really, that you repeatedly brought up in your interview process for the lab was the great care and also the great sense of protocol with which you've already alluded to, and your treatment of the particular subject matter, you know, of the Wendigo within your story, because it is an, you know, a misunderstood, misrepresented, but also from an Indigenous point of view, a very, very powerful figure. Can you explain some of the process that you've been doing that with? Because I know it is something that, you know, lands in that gray space based upon like what the world knows versus what the culture knows where it comes from in terms of what it is, you know.
Yeah, I think that kind of ties to two parts and touches on what Rob and Keanu have been saying, is like just from a personal standpoint in the lab, and anytime I've kind of workshopped this story, it's a tough one to know how to set up this world and these rules of the world and how much to tell without it going like too far or too little. And do people really need to know, or is it a universal understanding of this being or this entity? And yeah, so it's been definitely a great experience to have all the mentors and advisors talk me through some of that, because what I've realized also in collaborating and being a co-writer of a short story that's also written, that also created a lot of barriers for me to feel like I had a right to insert myself more in the story or become more personalized with the characters, and kind of this fear that like, I don't know if I should be doing that or if that's my right to do that. And I think it was Roselle who actually really was like, you were entrusted with this story, like you are the director, like write your own version, like just a lot of encouragement to not like dishonor the story that's there, but to connect to it more, because I did realize I've had so much insecurity and anxiety around maybe not getting intimate enough with the story because of the collaboration part, and just wanting to respect it so closely that it almost became like a disability in my writing process or collaborative writing process. So that's something I've really taken away, is just like Rob, how do I put myself into it more and also streamline it? Because I think there's so many elements and pieces that it could also become unclear what the main point of the story is. And so that's one thing I'm definitely focusing in on. And in terms of what KEANU just mentioned, I don't know, like I haven't talked much about it, but I also do run my studio, which is in general called Spotted Fawn Productions. And we are open all year round, because animation's not exactly a thing you could just pack up and work at home until the next production starts. It's either you're in it or it'd be such a difficult process to constantly restart. And so aside from like a particular project, I'm always balancing a massive team and multiple projects, where I think exactly what Maya talked about. And it's something I've always been trying to do, is break a hierarchy, a top-down hierarchy, and focus on a sort of horizontal hierarchy of how do you work, how do you build an Indigenous production model in animation as well. So I think one thing that actually really changed me, and I'm not lying when I say this, is the structure of the Zoom experience in general of this lab that we did, to have those end of day sessions with different artists and people that kind of just take you out of that moment and that stress of the task at hand, and like get to experience, an 11-year-old from Hawaii. Like it's just such an amazing, like just how everybody was just like so happy. So we have like our end of week meetings, and already I was like, okay, I would like to curate something where people get to like suggest artists, elders, poets, musicians. I want to give honorariums and have these invited guests, like, and my team is so excited. And it like, so just how the lab went in general and the care that was put into this space of Zoom, which is so odd. Like, I can't tell you how emotionally impacted I was by the lab, and that has changed me as a whole. And yeah, like KEANU said, I have a responsibility for all my projects in the studio as a whole, of like to be so considerate of what we're doing and how people feel. So I echo exactly what KEANU said, not just for this project but in general.
Thank you for that. I think one of the challenges that the team and I had was, is typically when we're gathering in person, we always took certain steps of great care to really establish, a trusting, safe space, for our artists to be able to do the deep work that's deeply personal, and to feel safe while they're doing it, and to be questioned about it, because it is, it's a big leap, I think, for an artist to open up their project for outside criticism. So first of all, you guys are a chance for even submitting to the selection process, but then, even bigger chance for surviving the NativeLab and the interrogation of your work, because it's not easy, but, we really tried to create a cultural space. We really tried to indigenize Zoom, and even the people that we went out to, to do our end of the day wind downs, the artists, the poets, the spoken word people, the musicians, so many of them, I think only one of them had really ever done one on Zoom. And definitely the you know, the cultural leader from New Mexico, from Tamaya Pueblo, that we asked to do our blessing. You know, he had never done that before, and they were all really nervous. They were trying to understand, how does this work in this digital space of offering prayer or offering poetry or offering songs. I think the 11-year-old was definitely the best at it from Hawaii. He was magical. He had a PowerPoint presentation. Oh my God. And the translations and the words and the flowers and the mountains and the islands, like he got the gold star, definitely. But I will say, but my encouragement to, I felt like the people who felt nervous about how do you do these cultural elements, you know, in the digital space, you know, it's like, I just told them, I was like, well, whenever you offer prayer or whenever you know, sing, I was like, not only are you blessing our Zoom space, I said, but you're blessing the internet as well, you know? And so I thought that was kind of a great visual. So it's so nice to know that we influenced how you're gonna do your work. I was interested to know, like, did you guys have a favorite, like you got to see a lot of your advisors work, you know, we had really great people like Shireen Dibus, you know, Rashad Ernesto Green, Elegance Breton, you know, Elamaya Tail Feathers, Carrie Warkia, Rizal Benali, Erica Tremblay, you know, a really rich and interesting multicultural, multi-tribal, indigenous, you know, group of advisors. Was there any of their work that you got to watch in advance or during or since the lab? Was there any of their work that really resonated for you, and any particular reason why? Rob?
I'd say probably the Erica. I would say if any of, I'd say the mentors whose work left the biggest impression on me. The one that I had never seen before, Erica's work, and seeing Little Chief, that short was like, was powerful. Like that was really profound, and that I didn't even realize how much that became like a blueprint of how I want to develop characters visually, with as little dialogue and as little exposition as possible, which is like such a big trap for people writing science fiction, like fantasy, just like wanting to explain everything and explain the world. And Erica was such a big proponent of like, your thing is a character study at its core, and you have to show people's character. You can't have them say who they are. Like nobody does that. And I think that was one of the biggest like pitfalls that I was running into trying to do science fiction in 15 pages, you know, and her telling me to like trust your audience, trust that like when you show something visually, like in Little Chief, when the film starts with the character like smoking a cigarette, they look a little jittery, you're not sure what's happening, and then you realize they're waiting to jump into this hotel room to steal a bunch of toiletries off of this cart. It says so much. It says more in a more interesting way that you'll never forget because you've seen it visually and you connect with that visual storytelling. Like that was so powerful for me. And that was new work that I've never seen before that will like always stick with me now. Rashad's film Gun Hill Road was a film I had seen back when it came out in 2011. And for me as like coming into my own body and spirit as like a two-spirit queer individual and like a gender fluid individual, seeing somebody take on, as a Latinx person as well, like seeing somebody take that story about trans identity and gender non-conforming identity and like taking the whiteness out of it and the colonization out of it, and taking like the white trans person coming out story and just like taking it back for mixed people and Latinx people, like it let me see part of my own life and world in a like a really important conversation that I wanted to be a part of, that I was, you know, coming out and emerging as. Just letting you see your own gente, your own people in that conversation is like so important, and being able to have such a powerful, beautiful character study. Like, and so that was, when I found out Rashad was one of our mentors, I like was so blown away. And he was so incredible to work with, had such great ideas on visual storytelling. And I was so grateful for that.
That's good to know. What about you, Keanu? Was there any one of your advisors whose work resonated with you particularly?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the fellowship and our workshops and stuff, I watched various films that she helped produce, War You and Bai. And I think I was fairly, really engaged in the stories that she was telling from, the female and women perspectives in their lives, and especially how they went about telling the stories, and how it was shot. As far as the cinematography, most of it was shot in one takes. So I thought that was really interesting, and also just learning a little bit more about Ella Maya's film, and just some of the clips that she showed. Some of them are one take kind of scenes. So I was kind of interested in that, and why they chose those things, and there's a good reason why they chose, the reason to shoot it in such a long take and continuous takes is for us as audience members to kind of be immersed in that atmosphere, in that place with the characters, and kind of live with them and those experiences. And definitely, Vi and War You, we're definitely of those the stories that you just are kind of stuck, and you're just sitting there observing, and you're watching, and you're seeing how things kind of unfold. So I thought it was very, impactful to see that there's these good stories within those short films. It's basically the short films all, kind of stitched together into more of like a cohesive story overall. So I really liked, how that was all structured, and interesting ways of structuring stories. And would be definitely something that, I would keep in mind with further projects down the line.
That's great. I think I see sweat beads forming. Keanu, do you want to turn your fan on?
I think I'm all right. I'm just
Okay. What about you, Amanda? Was there any of your advisors' work that resonated the most with you?
So hard to pick, because I think
I know
they all had such wonderful elements to offer, and in such different ways that you didn't feel like you were getting the same presentation or the same kind of messages. So that was what was, I think, so wonderful about it, is everyone had kind of an expertise or an area that I found was so well-rounded when you put them all together. So I think we were definitely spoiled with mentors and advisors to look up to. And I guess if I had to pick anyone, which I feel really bad about, because again, I felt everyone was so wonderful, is probably seeing Rozelle's transformation of their first film and to like the second film, and then the current one that they're working on. I thought that was so powerful to see the transformation of their work and their characters, and how they deal with dialogue, and just the evolution of that, and just what they had to say in general. I really appreciated their work and process, and what they've kind of gone through, and also super like entranced by Rashad's work as well. Just the ability he has to work with actors, and the power of the subject matter, and just the acting in particular. But everybody's like, Carrie, it's like there's so much to admire about the collaborative process and the support for Indigenous women, and there's just so much. I hate to narrow it down to that, but
I know, I'm the same way. I feel bad for asking you that question. They won't be watching this though. Okay. Well, I mean, that's part of the reason why I ask you that is just because that's part of the way that not only do we curate, the fellows and the works, and hopefully the next place we can get them to, but it's really do a lot of curation, around, our creative advisors. We try to really choose a really diverse array of artists and kinds of work and approaches to their work. And I think with Carrie and Ella Maya, it was really important for us to have them, because they are both really redefining production models, from an Indigenous perspective. And you see how it manifests on screen so beautifully alongside other people's work, that it has particular strengths, to it as well. I think if like I've known Rashad for years, and if you just saw him as an everyday guy in the street in New York, like you would never think that he made such a tender, caring film about a trans character, a teenage trans character who's going through an experience. Or I think the one story with Carrie Warkias from Vi that really resonated with me the most is the one that she presented in her workshop, which was the story that takes place on the island of Samoa, and the woman who is having, I think they're commemorating a death. I don't even really fully know what's happening specifically culturally, but just through the visual storytelling and the performance of that particular character. Like I remember seeing that film when it premiered at the Berlin Film Festival on this massive IMAX screen and just weeping whenever I saw that film, because it resonated with me so much as somebody who had, recently lost both parents. And I saw that there was an element of mourning to that story, and it wasn't fully described. It wasn't verbally articulated, but it was just a moment. And it was just something that was, I thought, so powerful and amazing. And, and I think for Ella Maya, with her film making approach, like KEANU, like you said, one, the production model she created, to be able to tell that story with equitable practices and just practices, and for it to manifest into something so beautiful, it just on screen, just is so amazing, to watch, these new cinematic traditions, I guess, really, that we were able to witness, so I have great faith that you guys will also do the same and continue to grow. Like Rizal said, I remember first meeting her when she was, a skateboarding filmmaker, guerrilla filmmaker kid. And now she's at NYU Tisch School, continuing to, innovate and create new things. And so I'm so glad that you guys took so much from them and from their, their processes and experiences. So tell me, like, in terms of, I guess, your own kind of technical steps in your filmmaking process, like where are you now? What are you engaged in at this moment? Amanda, I think yours is really interesting because you're simultaneously creating puppets and a physical world for a stop motion animation while you're writing the script too. So tell us about where you are in your process.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that literally the day after our closing ceremony, there's a few select people I called from my team and the producer from the NFB, and I was like, wow, are we allowed to swear on here? Okay. I was like, wow, I've been a really big shithead for like so long. I'm just massively stressed out all the time. And I think the lab, like especially that workshop with Joan, like I just got ripped apart and went into a place like, I was like, oh my God, I used to journal. I used to write poetry myself. I used to do all these things artistically and had this connection that running a studio and business, blah, 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 had like completely suppressed over the last couple of years, where I'm just so high strung all the time and stressed out and juggling everything. And it just like neutralized me. And my producer was like, you're glowing. What happened? Like I've seen this side of you in years. And it was just really a good first step to kind of like let go of something. And also I think when Bird was talking about in the closing ceremony, just like, you don't want to put that energy into your production. You don't want to put that energy into your team. And I think Rizal talked about it, just where that can manifest into the project itself, if that's the energy you're going through or experiencing, and that responsibility as a director. So the next sort of steps, I think, after kind of sharing, like, I was like, I feel like a new person, which was so weird. My partner's like, Sundance has changed you. But I was like, in a good way though, I'm a better person now. But yeah, it was just really exciting, and it actually completely reinvented how I want to approach things. So I want to actually do a bunch of workshops with my writers and the character or the person we're basing our main character Dove off of, and just like get to the bottom. I want to share all the things that I've kind of learned from the lab, advice I was given, to get to the center of the story and kind of like let go of all those barriers or kind of insecurities that would be blocking it from going where it could. And that's kind of the next step, is actually just the story. And we're like, hey, we've already spent all this development time. Let's really get this story right. Let's take what we can learn from this lab and really nail it. And alongside that, you know, we're doing all sorts of research tests, puppet tests, like materialization that can still happen, because it's not necessarily fully dependent on the story. But I really, really want to get the story right and just kind of, you know, curate these kind of workshops, and share what I feel like I've learned and where I want to go with it. So I'm just really excited, and I haven't really worked on the script at all. I really tried to like take a step back and be like, don't try to rewrite it right now. Like, go into this new place and like really find that creative part of myself again. Because I know it's there. It's just been kind of suppressed with stress for a while. So yeah, that's sort of where I'm at.
That's so exciting. I'm so happy to hear that, you know. I really feel like part of our process is decolonizing as well as indigenizing. And also I hopefully can take opportunity to do that in our daily lives. I know I struggled with it myself. Rob, what about you? Where are you within your process?
After the fellowship like intensive ended, I like went out to the forest because I felt very similar to Amanda, where I just felt broken down to my core in a really positive way. And, you know, I came from a background of like experimental cinema and video art. And so, you know, sketching and journaling and things like that have been important to me. But I think over the years, as you get a process kind of honed in and you're meeting deadlines and you're running a business, it like, you kind of lose touch with those things. And yeah, the writing workshop with Joan was really, really important at having me get uncomfortable again and wanting to feel like a student again, and wanting to like deepen that well that I can fill with knowledge. And I just needed to get out into nature and commune with it and kind of be in my own personal ceremony and ask my ancestors like for some guidance on this, because I had felt so split open from all of this. And so for me, recentering my spirituality and my connection with my ancestors and my community is something that this brought to me, and it's strengthened my story and my commitment to Indigenous storytelling and the way I want to manifest it through filmmaking. It's like it struck me to my core, and I feel like more sure than ever of like where I want to be going as an Indigenous storyteller and filmmaker. And I think one of the things that felt really important to me is like I want to see this through visually and really have a visual understanding of like what I want to show on screen. And that came from like Rashad and Rizal and Erica. And so I'm working with my storyboard artist, Leah Dubuque, who's a really incredible person I went to school with and have stayed in touch with for the last decade. And we're actually going to do, I think, a graphic novel as I rewrite the script. So, and you know, that graphic novel is, I think, something that'll help us center ourselves and our intentions visually, and you know, can also serve as like the storyboards in a practical way. But I think we'll just have us learn the story and learn the language of the story visually before we start filming this thing in the next year, whenever, you know, COVID kind of allows us to come out again.
Coming out again. KEANU, what about you?
It seems like all of us are going through some sort of transformation, and that's definitely what I've been feeling since you know, the workshops and fellowship that we kickstarted off kind of ended. Just to, I guess, kind of recap, you know, I remember leaving the session feeling like I could write this and I can do this and I'm ready to do everything, you know, just dig deep into it and just get it done. And, you know, I think it was suggested that we take some time. So it's been about almost, you know, about 2 weeks now. And it's like, last week I was thinking of it. I was just like, I need to really start working on my script and everything, but it's like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I just felt so, it's just extremely hard because you just kind of, through all the sessions, you get so much advice of, there's this path you can take, you can do this and try this, try this. And now I'm just kind of like, I don't know where to start. There's like so many different avenues and places that you can go, and, and just looking at different, as thinking of the mood boards and all those other things, it's like, there's so many things I have to do. And it's like, I don't know where to start at, and I'm not sure where to, start delving deeper into my character and start listing all those questions and just starting to be more honest with myself. And it's just like, I'll work on it tomorrow, and, that day just goes and it's over. And it's like, I haven't done shit. And it's just like, what's wrong? And so I've been fairly stuck, and it's just, I feel like there's something that I have to do internally where it's like, I have to do something inside where it's like, I have to find some kind of balance within myself to say, whatever I went through, whatever I'm kind of seeking, whatever I'm kind of feeling right now, I have to, be okay with that and kind of resolve that so I can get started on this project. And I think I don't know, it's just been a really weird kind of time, and I haven't really felt this way in a long time. And it's just been extremely hard to just do some things to feel motivated every day, waking up, just wanting to do something. Then after a while, he's just like, why the hell did I get selected for Sundance? Like, I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm just wasting my day, and I'm not, sitting and writing like I'm supposed to. And it's like, I was given this tremendous opportunity to become a, better writer and filmmaker, and it's like, I'm not doing anything. And it's like, I'm still trying to figure that out. And it's just like, what is it that needs to happen, or what am I doing that's not clicking where I can, I can really get it done. Because I was thinking when I was originally writing it at the beginning, it was just, I was so pumped for it, and I was just like writing all these different ideas, and I was really into it. And all that just kind of got stripped away from me for some reason. I'm just like, I have no idea what is happening. And like, I guess, I don't know, this is kind of scary. It's just like, I have seriously no idea. And it's like, I've been struggling to get it. And it's just, you just got to keep working on it. But for sure, it's just, I just have to really set myself down and, do something for myself to figure that out inside of me so I can start, getting to work on this. But that's where I've been kind of at, just a lot of mental kind of thing I'm trying to work out.
Yeah. Well, that's not a bad thing, KEANU. It's not at all. It's like, to be fair, there's a global pandemic happening. It's like, the Redskins are changing their name. The Supreme Court is upholding tribal sovereignty. It's like the Dakota Access Pipeline was told to, empty itself out. Racial justice reckoning is happening in our country. Systems are being dismantled. There's so many different kinds of wars happening in the world that we're living in right now. So naturally, I think we're all, I feel the same way. I feel the same way a lot of times that, it's just kind of like, oh my God, what am I going to deal with today? Like, how am I going to try to make some type of progress, and going back to something that Rob said, going out to nature or going, sometimes I have to do something just as simple as just like letting my bare feet touch the earth, just as a way of trying to ground myself and to being able to root myself and to make offerings of prayer and, sweetgrass or sage or, burning those things to, reconnect myself to my core and to, to my people, really, And so I would encourage you to do the same. You can't force it, because I think if you do force it, it will become inauthentic, your story. And I think that, you're still filtering through, I think, all the amazing feedback you got, all the great, encouragement you received, and just letting you know that we all believe in you. So, you're going to get there, and there's nothing wrong with where you are right now.
KEANU, you're amazing. And the depth you have as a writer is profound. And I saw glimpses of that when we were in the writing workshop. And I think I think maybe just let yourself just grow and be split apart and let yourself heal, and just like, I think you stumbled onto an abyss, like a well of knowledge and like inspiration. And I think I think you're like staring at this, like, not even abyss, it's like a mountain, dude, and you're like staring at this. And I think that's why you don't know where to start, is because I think you have so much inside of you to like pull from. Like you are a force to be reckoned with, and like I see that so clearly in the workshop that we all got to do together. And I also want to say to the two of you, it's been so incredible being with you both in all of this, because our work is really, and I'm also so grateful to Sundance, like the work the three of us are doing is truly touching on what's happening right now in this world when we're thinking about labor exploitation, capitalism, like workers' rights, when we're thinking about the environment, when we're thinking about gender justice, and when we're thinking about like queer liberation, and we're thinking about indigenous sovereignty, and like the three of us combined are touching on everything that is happening in this world right now. And it's like frightening how accurate all of this is, but it's why I think our films are so important, and why it is taking longer for us to heal from this stuff, to be able to actually start writing again right now.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, like, I have not touched the script either, and I felt like beyond ripped apart and told to like, oh, like everyone suggested so many different things that it felt like, yeah, like, should I even do this story? Like, that's how it can feel, and I still feel that way. So don't feel like you're not doing anything. Like, we're all selected for a reason, and like I said, I may not write for a while yet, and that's totally okay, and allow yourself to go through that transformation. Find that part with you. I still haven't really processed what everybody has said yet and where I want to go with that, and I don't think you're supposed to have gotten through that yet, so I wouldn't feel bad at all. Like, this is part of it, and the transformation is not about like, oh, we're supposed to have a finished script now already. It's like we're just at the start of that. So yeah, you're not alone.
Thanks for the both of you saying that. It means a lot.
Yeah. And also you have a lot of strong traditions, you know, to draw upon, you know, to get yourself, you know, to the next place, you know, and so I know that we are living in a COVID world, and it's a lot of difficulties in trying to, you know, practice our traditions, but, you know, there are still, you know, a lot of things that we can continue to do. Well, but I just think that each of you, like Rob, like you said, you guys are all touching on such important themes and ideas that are, you know, even within a larger, bigger, deeper ancestral continuum. You know, you're all making contributions in some way, and I know that you're going to continue to do that. And we're here to help you. We're here to support you. I'll get my pom-poms out and cheer you on. And I will tell you of the history of the filmmakers that I've been very lucky to work with, you know, some of them like Taika Waititi and Sidney Freeland and Sterling Harjo, and, you know, and so many others. Some of our powerhouse filmmakers that we have working today have all been in the same place before. I have had to scoop them up and pick them up off of the floor and say, come on, you guys, you can keep doing it. You can keep doing it. We're here. Let's do this. Let's figure it out. So we're here for you to help you figure it out. But also, you know, I would just kind of like, I know we were all blown away by Amanda's color palette kind of world building effort. You know, like I would even encourage you to start, you know, thinking about palettes and colors and landscapes and, you know, and those kinds of things, I think, because you know your world so well. You know, each of you knows your world so well. And I think, you know, trying to find ways to strengthen the articulation of that is going to be great. So I just want to say thank you all for being you, for being the artists that you are, and for, you know, all of your great, you know, visions and voices that you're offering to the world. They're definitely such blessings.